Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Barrie, and I am delighted to be with you for the fifth in this series of 6 online conversations entitled From Doing Yoga to Being Yoga. I am the author of Evolving Your Yoga, 10 Principles for Enlightened Practice. And in this series of talks, I'm exploring what it means to bring your yoga off the mat and into your life, and how to do it in ways that feel authentic and meaningful to you. Today, I'm going to be talking about the art of authentic self-care, what self-care really means from the perspective of yoga, and what the yoga tradition says about loving and honoring oneself as an inner state, as an inner stance. I'll also be offering some specific ways to apply this understanding so that you can begin to bring these insights into what you do in the name of self-care and start to infuse those things with a deeper wisdom about what it means to cultivate a loving and honoring inner relationship. And really, the yoga tradition has such a wealth of wisdom and practical strategies to offer us in this regard. And I'm really excited to share some of this with you in this talk. Yoga as a practice of self-care has been something I have been thinking about for many years. And it's something I write about in my book. And I wanted to start out by sharing a little story about the writing of the book that was kind of a full circle moment for me in this regard. So I was very honored to have my friend and fellow teacher, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, the wife of our Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, contribute the foreword to my book. And when I received her foreword, I didn't know what she was going to write. But when I received the foreword and opened the document on my computer, I got chills because she starts out the foreword with a question. Do you love yourself? Do you love yourself? And the reason I got chills when I read that for the first time was because little did she know, but that is the exact question that has really been at the heart of my yoga journey for the past 25 years. Because when I came to yoga as a person in my early 20s, working at a temp job in Midtown Manhattan and kind of questioning what I wanted to do with my life, questioning the meaning of life and my purpose in life, I didn't have a loving relationship with myself. And that was true when I came to yoga. And that was true even after I began to practice and even after I had entered into my first teacher training, actually. You know, I was doing yoga on the outside. I could do all the poses because I'm a naturally flexible body type and I was young and limber. And so even though I was doing yoga on the outside, on the inside, it was the same judgmental, self-critical, perfectionist voice that I had been living with for many years of my life. And it really wasn't until I started doing some of the more internal practices and started contemplating the teachings of yoga and studying the teachings on a regular basis and was able to context the physical practice within the framework of the wisdom of the yoga tradition that inner dialogue really started to change. And over time, through learning about the vision of the human being from the perspective of yoga, from contemplating the ideas of how truly worthy and magnificent every human being is when seen through this lens of understanding how precious our lives are, how amazing our bodies are, all of this began to help me over time learn what it means to really love myself. It helped me learn not just as an intellectual idea, but as an experience, what it felt like. And from that, how to act in a way that reflected those qualities. So it was quite something to read that question, do you love yourself? Which then became the very first thing that appears in the book, actually. And I think many of us can relate to this idea that postural practice in itself does not guarantee we will feel great about ourselves. Furthermore, a commitment to yoga or even a desire to practice yoga does not necessarily arise out of a positive and healthy self-esteem or out of a healthy inner relationship. And yoga doesn't necessarily serve to help us cultivate a loving inner stance. And I think it's really the same in many ways with the things that we do in the name of self-care. That, you know, there's so much emphasis on this term self-care in the self-help and yoga industry. It's like such a buzzword in the mainstream wellness culture. And it's often portrayed as like pampering ourselves or doing something that feels kind of indulgent. And of course, you know, it's portrayed as more than that as well. And, you know, while all of those things are fine, what I also know is that it is possible to do all the things that look like self-care, including yoga, without having a loving or accepting attitude to ourselves, without really caring for ourselves. So we can do yoga, we can do all the things that look like self-care and still not have a very positive relationship with ourselves on the inside. This is why, for me, self-care, you know, what we do that we call self-care really needs to go along with self-honoring what we think and self-love what we feel in order for it to be complete, in order for it to be authentic and really move us toward healing and wholeness. So what we do, what we think, what we feel, all three of these things I think go hand in hand on this journey toward really honoring and caring for ourselves in a genuine way. And I think this is where yoga comes in and where we have the opportunity to use our practice, not just as an act of self-care, but to back that up, to infuse that with ideas of self-honoring and self-acceptance and nurture feelings of love and respect and appreciation for our bodies and our minds. And that, when those three things come together, what we do, what we think, what we feel, that is a really powerful way to teach ourselves what it really means and what it really feels like to honor and love ourselves and to embody and strengthen that. And this is really the crux, I think, of how yoga relates to authentic self-care and self-honoring for me, that self-honoring and a loving inner relationship isn't only about the things we do in the name of self-care, it's really about thinking it, feeling it, and from that inner experience, taking actions that reflect it. And particularly yoga philosophy, I think, has so much wealth of wisdom to offer us in this regard, because it's really the philosophical context that provides the backdrop for a meaningful and transformational yoga practice. It's that understanding when we take it to heart, when we practice applying it, that's really what gives the deeper dimension and brings this perspective to what we do in yoga that we can also, I think, apply to the things that we consider self-care. So in today's talk, I am going to be sharing with you some of the foundational yoga teachings that I think help to frame, support, and inform this endeavor to cultivate a loving inner relationship with ourselves in yoga and beyond yoga. And I'll be talking about the nature of love in yoga and several specific ways to bring that spirit of true self-honoring to the things you do to take care of yourself, so that it's not only self-care, something that looks like self-care on the outside, but begins to reflect an authentic and loving inner stance. Before we get into that, though, I want to let you know about a couple of things. One is if the content of this talk and the other talks I've given in this series resonate with you, I'd love to invite you to try out my weekly on-demand classes. They bring together alignment-based asana technique with the wisdom teachings of yoga, and they're really designed for teachers and experienced students who want to go deeper, who wish to learn more about both yoga philosophy and alignment-based practice, and how the two can work together to deepen and refine not only your yoga practice and your teaching if you're a teacher, but to help you really bring the gifts of yoga into your life. So we have an amazing community of dedicated students and teachers around the world on this platform. You get a brand new class every Saturday morning. They're all different. They get added to a community library of almost 150 classes now, all different lengths, all different focuses. And there's even a section for Q&A and comments in there. So again, I'd love to share that with you. And I'm going to be sharing a coupon code in the comments when we're done here. That will give you a free month to try out the classes if you're interested. I also want to give a shout out to Offeringtree, who is the generous sponsor that is making this series of talks possible. So Offeringtree is an all-in-one, easy to use platform that really makes it easy and accessible for yoga teachers and wellness professionals to sell courses, teach classes, manage memberships, and more with like one login and one account. Super simple. So if you are a teacher or wellness professional that's kind of been feeling overwhelmed or intimidated when it comes to moving your classes online or expanding your online presence, Offeringtree can help save you time, energy, and money. And as I've gotten to know the team at Offeringtree over the past few months working on this series, I can also say that they are a company that really cares about supporting independent teachers, supporting community, and supporting the wellness industry overall. So if you are looking at how to build out your online offerings, you will definitely want to check out Offeringtree. And again, I'm going to pop a link in the comments that will give you a discount on your subscription with them. Okay, so I want to talk about the nature of love according to yoga, because I think this is really the foundation of how to make your self-care and your yoga practice really an authentic act of cultivating a loving inner stance. So the nature of love according to yoga. Yoga teaches that at our deepest essence, when all is said and done, we are of the nature of love, that there is a place of pure and independent, self-generated love within each of us. So love is not something we need to acquire or attain. It is who we are. And that is love with a capital L, pure, unconditional, independent, full, always there, ever present. And in the yoga tradition, this love is considered to be a sacred, even divine essence. And it is considered that it lives within each of us as our deepest self, as our truest nature. So when we touch this place of love as an inner state, this gives rise to the inner attitude toward ourselves of self-honoring that's reflected in our outer activities. So it's really, from the perspective of yoga, it's about going inside to experience the source of love. And then that begins to kind of naturally pervade who we are and how we are. There's like a flower that naturally gives off fragrance. It's just its nature. And this is what Bhakti Yoga is all about, experiencing and cultivating this state of love within, harnessing the power of love through cultivating devotion. And that's often done through the practice of rituals or puja or chanting to invoke love for a beloved teacher or deity. But it can also be done through asana practice, through study, through any of the practices of yoga. And the purpose, or kind of the end goal of Bhakti Yoga, is to experience that love within ourselves and ultimately to become more anchored in that state. And in the non-dual traditions, it is to also recognize that we are that love, that we ultimately are the object of our devotion, and to merge with it in our awareness. And when we do fully recognize that that source of love is within us, independent of anything outside of us, it doesn't require an outer object to experience. So in yoga, and I'm kind of starting with the big lofty picture here, and then I'm going to bring it down to how we can practice it. But in yoga, the state of love is that state of sacred connection or devotion even. So if you think of kind of the ordinary love you experience for someone or something or a pet, something you cherish or value in your life, there is a connection in that love, right? But there's also a sense of preciousness, like you want to take care of and honor that person or that animal or that valued object. You are devoted in that sense to the object of love. So imagine turning that feeling of connection and preciousness back towards yourself, seeing actually yourself as an object of devotion worthy of love and reverence. So our issue from the perspective of yoga, so to speak, is that we look in the wrong place for love. We look outside of ourselves, and that's where we go wrong. That's thinking that the source of love is outside in another person or in an animal or in an object or, in an experience. And we start to put, the burden of experiencing love on that object. And when in truth, what yoga teaches is that place of love is within us, and it is free, and it is completely self-generating. So our goal in yoga is to be able to touch that source of true love within ourselves, and through that experience, to begin to allow it to fashion our activities, to infuse our thoughts about ourselves and how we are in our lives. So it's from the inside out, so to speak. And this is the core of what all the practices of yoga actually are designed to do, to take us inside and to uncover that place of independent love within ourselves. And from that experience, a sense, the way I experience it is that from that experience is we do get a sense that we are fundamentally okay, just as we are, that we are enough as we are. There is an experience of fullness and wholeness and worthiness that comes from touching that place of love. It begins to naturally emerge. Again, it's nothing we have to make happen. It's just that essence starts to infuse itself into our lived experience. And then over time, we get to know it in different ways, a sense of contentment or self-acceptance or greater self-reliance. We develop a relationship to this place, to this experience, and we get to know it more as who we truly are, that it starts to become more and more our reference point of who we are. We start to take ownership of it. And that's how it begins to naturally reflect out into our lives. So it is from the inner experience that an authentic and loving inner relationship grows. And in my experience, yoga helps us to get to know that place of independent love and fullness inside, such that it starts to become this more basic reference point for who we are more of the time. And this naturally begins to shift our relationship with ourselves. We begin to, out of that inner experience, we naturally begin to want to honor and take care of ourselves. We respect ourselves. We begin to honor and recognize the miracle of this body. We start to develop a kinder, more compassionate inner relationship. And how this happens, this process, of course, it is what we do, it is the practices, it is what we think about, it is how we contemplate, it is how we study. But there's also a kind of mystical, right, or mysterious part to this process. I think it's really important to recognize that right from the beginning, yoga is both a path of what we do, and there's also a mystical or more subtle aspect. It's beyond what we actually do. There's a more subtle aspect to our transformation in yoga, and that's a little bit mysterious. So I can't say exactly how that process happens, but I know that over time, our self-effort meets this more mystical quality. We might call it grace or divine providence, however we consider it. This kind of alchemical process happens that goes hand in hand with our self-effort. And I also want to acknowledge that this is not necessarily easy. I remember a teacher of mine once saying something like, you have to learn how to think well of yourself despite what other people think of you, not because what other people think of you. So, really, I think it is a tall order. And I can say for myself, it's really been a steady diet of nourishing body-mind practices that have allowed me to know what it's like to have a happy relationship with myself most of the time, to have a loving and friendly and accepting inner life. And I can also say from my experience that it is an ongoing process. It is not a switch that we turn on and it's one-time thing. It is the daily ongoing work that involves discrimination, discipline, patience, compassion, right? Forgiveness also. And this is why I consider it really to be an art, the art of authentic self-care. It's a creative process. It's about touching and expressing that deeper place of love within you and your intention to align with it, to reflect it in who you are. It's personal, it's individual, it's a creative act. And there are some basic approaches that I think can help you in your practices of authentic self-care that come from the yoga tradition. And I want to share a few of those with you now. So the first is what I call, and actually this is from Edwin Bryant, who wrote a wonderful translation of the Yoga Sutras, where he talks about maximizing the potential of sattva in our lives. So maximizing sattva. As you may know, yoga philosophy talks about 3 different qualities called the gunas. These are threads or strands that interact to make up our material existence and everything we experience in our bodies, in our minds, and in our lives. And these 3 qualities are 1, tamas, which is the quality of heaviness, inertia, and rest. Rajas, the quality of activity, passion, movement, dynamism. And sattva, the quality of light, lucidity, clarity. And so as yogis, really what the tradition talks about is that we need all 3 of them, and all 3 of them are always present in different combinations. So rest, activity are both needed, the tamas and the rajas, but what we're really doing in yoga, what we're really going for, is maximizing the potential of sattva. So we use tamas, we use rajas in the amounts that are needed to support the optimization or the maximization of the sattvic quality. So I offer that to you because I'm not going to tell you what to do, that's sattvic, but to consider what activities leave you feeling more calm, more equanimous, more clear, more calm, more centered within yourself. What leaves you feeling more light or lighthearted, right? These are all sattvic qualities. So, as you go through, as you choose what you might do in the name of self-care, consider how it leaves you feeling, and what it involves. And so these kind of, these qualities of light, peace, calm, centeredness, these are all qualities of sattva. And so we are going toward maximizing sattva. So that's one thing. Second, it's very important, from the perspective of yoga, we need to include all parts of ourselves in our self-care. It's not just how we look on the outside, right? Or our attending to our physical body, right? The yoga tradition offers us many different maps and models of the human being, who we are. And they differ a little bit, but what they all have in common is that they give a model of the human being as a series of interpenetrating layers that moves from gross to subtle. So from the physical body down to the more subtle core. The koshas is one map, the idea of the 4 bodies. Vedanta is another, the map of the tattvas is another. And again, they're all a little bit different, but what they all have in common is that we are not just the physical body, right? So it is important that in order for our self-care to be complete, it has to include all parts of ourselves. Not just the physical body, but the energy, our prana, our breath, our mind, our spirit, to attend and have ways to take care of all these different parts of ourselves. So that's another thing to keep in mind. What are the things you're doing? And you can actually take some of these models, right? And consider, what are the things I'm doing to take care of my body, to my physical body, to take care of my energy, to take care of my mind, to take care of my intellect, right? And that is, again, usually a combination of what we do and what we reflect on, what we think about, right? So it has to and how we feel, right? So all those different parts of ourselves, a kind of holistic vision of self-care, if you will. And then the third thing is to include self-reflection as part of your self-care. So stepping back, having a way to reflect, assess, contemplate, how, what you're doing, how you're taking care of yourself. I think that's really important for it to be integrated and assimilated. So I think part of authentic self-care needs to include time for this kind of contemplation, for a reflective inner stance, just allowing yourself the space and time to reflect and take in what how you're aligning with this core of love within yourself, how you're reflecting an honoring, loving inner relationship. And self-reflection can be writing, can be journaling, it can be drawing, it can be just being in nature. I think just giving yourself space for quietude and reflection is really necessary to make what we do in the name of self-care, and even in the name of yoga, a conscious, creative, and authentic process. And so those are 3 ways: maximizing sattva, including all parts of yourself, and having time and a practice, a way to reflect and integrate. And so my experience is that as we get to know this inner state of self-honoring, self-respect, self-acceptance, and begin to feel more inclined to commit to living those qualities, we also begin to become more clear, more discerning about the choices that help us to strengthen that connection. Also, we get better able to return to it, to restore it when we've lost it or gotten derailed in some way. And over time, all this allows us to act more and more from this place, so that who we are in the world becomes congruent. It becomes a reflection of a loving and friendly inner relationship that is reflected out in our choices and how we live our lives. And, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's more like an intimate, creative, day-to-day journey. And I think that's really important as well, because when it becomes a personal journey, when you really are able to take it to heart, that is when it will be most meaningful and authentic to you. So I hope that by sharing some of these perspectives, both from the tradition and from my own experience, that some of this can support you in forging this path toward greater self-acceptance, greater self-empowerment, and greater self-love. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.